Hi everybody, my name is Danielle Nicole and welcome to Monetary Makeup. In today's video, we are going to be reviewing the new Patrick Ta Sculpt and Contour palette, which comes with one cream and one bronzer shade. So I'm really excited to see how this product performs. Now I did pick up the shade She's Statuesque, which is the lightest shade. So we'll see how that shade works on my cool undertone. And our topic of the day is going to be about Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. And I just have a couple of thoughts that I'd like to share with you guys, so I really hope the topic of the day is helpful for you guys. So if you guys are excited to see how this Patrick Ta Duo Cream Contour Bronzer Palette performs on my skin, definitely don't forget to hit the like button, and let's get started right now. Okay, so I have not used this palette yet on my face, so what I would like to do is open the Patrick Ta Cream Contour Powder Bronzer Duo up. That way you guys can see what it looks like. The packaging is really sleek. It has a nice kind of rose gold finish, and unfortunately with this type of packaging, you know, your fingerprints really do get all over it. There's just not too much you can do about that. But there is a pretty nice mirror in here as well. Now let me bring this closer so you can see. So this is the cream contour right here. And one thing I really love about makeup artists when they create palettes, they often include little details that really make a big difference. So there's actually a little lip here that protects the cream, so that way when you're dipping into the powder, nothing gets into the cream. So I think that those little details make a huge difference. And then this is the powder bronzer. So let's first get started with swatches. So the consistency almost reminds me of the Danessa Myricks Balm Contour, except for this one feels just a little bit more thin. So here is the cream contour, and I'll bring this in closer in just a second. Next, let's swatch the powder bronzer. This does feel very finely milled and very silky. So let's get a swatch of the bronzer. So it is pretty light, so I don't think it's going to be too deep for my skin. I will say I don't think it's that cool tone. I would say the contour leans a little bit more neutral and the bronzer leans a little bit warm, at least in comparison to some of the other swatches that I'm about ready to show you. So here's some swatch comparisons for you guys. I'm going to bring this up closer in just a second. So the first two swatches are Patrick Ta, so that's the powder bronzer and the cream contour. Next up is the e.l.f. Putty Bronzer in the shade Feelin' Shady. So as you can see, this one has a much more gray, fair undertone. Next up is the Westman Atelier Contour Stick in the shade Biscuit. And lastly is the new KVD Liquid Gel Mod Con Contour in the shade Fair Cool 90. So once again, Patrick Ta, e.l.f. Putty Bronzer Feelin' Shady, Westman Atelier Biscuit, and KVD ModCon Fair Cool. So you guys know I am all about using products for multi-purposes. So I don't have any makeup on my skin except for the e.l.f. Eye Primer in the shade Rose, as well as my brows. So I'd like to go in with this Patrick Ta powder bronzer on my eyes just to see how it does as a transition shade. Refer number 1 brush. So I just dipped into the powder bronzer, so this is what that shade looks like on the brush. And let's see how this does as a transition shade. I'm going to dip in one more time and build it up a little bit. Let me zoom you guys in just a little bit more. So I do have moisturizer on my skin and no makeup, as I said, so the lights are really reflecting off of my skin. But so this is with the Patrick Ta bronzer on this eye and nothing on this side. I do like it so far as a transition shade. It's It's a little bit warmer than I particularly like for a bronzer, but as far as the eyes go, I do really like it on the eyes so far. Alright, so let's dip back in with our rougher number 1 and apply this eye. Dipping back in just as I did on the left eye. Okay, so this is what it looks like with both eyes finished as far as the powder bronzer. I do like it on the eyes, I must say. Okay, I'm going to finish up the rest of my complexion products, and then I will come back and we will apply She's Statuesque on the rest of my face. Okay, you guys, so I have the rest of my makeup on. I don't have any blush, bronzer, or highlight, of course, because we're going to be going in with this Patrick Ta Sculpt palette. Now, real quick, of course you saw I applied the bronzer shade, the powder formula to my eyes, and it is a beautiful transition shade, as I mentioned, but I think you just need a little bit more to deepen it up to create some definition. So I went in to finish up the rest of my eyes with the Jolie Beauty Vampirism palette, which is absolutely beautiful. I just did a review of this palette in case you guys missed it, so I will link it right up there for you guys. But alright, so now let's move on to the face. Now, I am very familiar with Patrick Ta, and I know that he says for his blush palettes, you're supposed to go in with powder first and then cream. And this palette for the bronzer contour is the opposite. But I actually like to do my bronzer first when it's powder. Otherwise, when I'm blending the bronzer in, it just gets really muddy. So that's what we're going to do today. So I'm going to use my Sephora Demi Fan Pro brush number 72. And I'm going to dip into the bronzer. I'm going to start with the cheeks. I love this brush, you guys. They discontinued it, but you can still find a few for sale on Mercari. You guys know I love you because that's my hidden secret, Mercari for makeup. And I think there's only 1 or 2 of these brushes left. So, like I said, I must love you guys if I'm giving away all my secrets. Just kidding. Now, you guys know I have a 5 head for sure. So I'm really going to try and build this up on the forehead just to see how deep this shade actually is. As far as the cheeks go, I really like the shade and the undertone. I was worried it was going to be way too warm, but so far it's actually looking like a beautiful bronzer shade, and it is matte. I think I forgot to mention that, but it is, at least it looks like it's a matte finish from the swatch. Yeah, it looks like it's matte. Just gonna build this up a little bit more than I typically would. That way you guys can see it. So I know it's a little bit harder to see on camera than it is in real life. This brush just fits so perfectly into the cheekbones, and because it's super fluffy, it offers a very diffused look. So if you can snag this 72 Demi Fan Brush, I highly recommend it, and plus it's synthetic. You guys, so you know I'm pretty fair, as you can see, and I think this shade so far for the cheeks is a beautiful formula as well as a beautiful shade. But I am having to build it up pretty heavily. So if you are fairer than I am, I really believe that this shade will definitely show up if you're fairer than me. Okay, you guys, so I'm really going ham on my forehead. And what's interesting is I feel like you can really see the shade on my cheekbones. And I would say it looks pretty sculpted and natural. But I'm having a hard time seeing the shade on my forehead, and I'll zoom in a minute here so you guys can see close up. But just with the bronzer so far, what do you guys think? Can you see it on my forehead? Because I can see it a little bit, and it looks very natural, but it's definitely a very light shade. Okay, so here's what I am looking like with just the powder bronzer on so far. So cheeks, forehead. So far, I would say because the shade is so light, I think that's why I can get away with this being a little bit warmer than I'm used to, but it does look beautiful. It's just a very light shade, so it's a little deceiving in the pan because when you look at it, I feel like it would be darker than it actually is, if that makes sense. e.l.f. Putty Blush Brush. Alright, next I'm going to take this e.l.f. Putty Blush Brush and dip into the Cream Contour shade. So I'm going to try and get a little bit more precise here. Ooh, okay. So this shade, in my opinion, is definitely deeper than the bronzer shade. Yeah, and I would say it's a true neutral. I don't think that it's really cool toned. All right, let's do the other side. Now this Putty Blush Brush from e.l.f. is doing a fantastic job. I am going to build it up a little bit more, even though I feel like I'm chiseled enough, because I want you guys to be able to really see this shade. So I thought I was smelling something, and I thought maybe it would be my soap I use for my brushes, but it's not. This cream has a very slight scent. It's almost like a vanilla or a sweet scent, and it's extremely subtle, but it is there. I don't smell it in the powder, but I just wanted to mention it that I do notice a very slight scent in the cream contour. It smells good. You know, just for the heck of it, I'm going to take a little of the cream contour on my forehead as well. And I'm really going to try and focus this up near the hairline, which is where I typically would apply cream contour. I don't know, you guys. I know that you're supposed to apply the cream contour first, but I really like the way I applied it today with the powder first, because I feel like it's really sculpted and I didn't over blend with using the bronzer second, and it's just looking beautiful. It brought a little bit of dew back to my skin, so even though I didn't use it how Patrick says to, I'm really enjoying it. And I also put a little bit down the tip of my nose, and everything looks super natural. So I also just quickly applied my favorite highlighter, or one of my favorite highlighters, which is from Half Caked in the shade Sugar Cookie. And this is actually a very balmy texture, and I applied that right here. And then I went in with my KVD blush in the shade Peony, and I did a little bit more of a stippling motion, and I did not notice anything being picked up from the Sculpt palette. Alright, next let's do the topic of the day, and then I will zoom you guys in for a close-up and give you my final thoughts. So for the quick topic of the day, I just wanted to touch a little bit on Bitcoin and cryptocurrency in general. Now, we don't have enough time to get into every single detail about it, but there's just two things that I wanted to bring up so that way you are aware of it. So the first thing I'd like to bring up regarding Bitcoin or cryptocurrency in general is to be careful of scammers. Now, when I say be careful of scammers, I'm not so much referring to the actual transactions of cryptocurrency, because in fact it is pretty secure when it comes to that. But what I'm referring to is when you are online. I don't know if any of you guys have ever noticed, but if you go onto any financial channels, even mine, there are so many messages from scammers out there trying to get your money, basically. So they're pretty easy to tell, in my opinion, if they're a scammer. So usually what happens, especially on YouTube, is you will see a comment, and it typically does have a significant amount of likes, as well as comments underneath that initial comment. Now, when you first click on these comments, the initial couple typically don't sound too bad. They almost sound like a couple people having regular conversations. But once you actually go down into the comments section, it almost always leads to a "what's up" number expecting you to text in, or it will have a name of an advisor saying that they recently invested in Bitcoin or cryptocurrency and they went from, let's say, $25,000 to $50,000 in 2 days. Now, I'm not saying that that's impossible with cryptocurrency or Bitcoin to earn that kind of money, but the second tip kind of leads into what I'm about to say. So I'm actually not for or against any type of investment. I think as long as you don't put all of your eggs in one basket and you do your research and you discuss these options with professionals, you should always have many different options in your retirement accounts. But when I do get heated about cryptocurrency in general, it's typically because a lot of the times when it is discussed, particularly when it's discussed online, but it's talked about like Bitcoin or cryptocurrency is a way to guarantee that you earn a huge investment in a very short amount of time. Now, again, I'm not saying that that's impossible. I mean, in fact, earning a large investment or return is actually pretty common if you do it correctly. But the issue I have with this is that you always only hear the discussions of the pros. You never hear discussions about the cons. So I could go on a huge rampage here, but like I said, I just wanted to keep it short and concise. So just to recap. So tip number 1, always be careful, especially when you are online reading comments, because they typically lead to a WhatsApp number or trying to get you to reach out to an investor to basically scam you out of your money. And I would hate to see that happen. And just to recap the second tip, just like any sort of investment, it does not matter what type of account it is, there are always going to be pros and cons, as well as risk versus reward. So if you are interested in Bitcoin or cryptocurrency, I do highly recommend reaching out to a true professional that specializes in this type of investment. And typically getting a referral from an online YouTube comment isn't necessarily the best form of an introduction for a real person. Now again, I always have to say it doesn't mean that this couldn't happen, and it doesn't mean that every single comment or WhatsApp number on there is a scam, but just be careful, you guys. I have seen so many people lose so much money and be conned and scammed out of money. It's just the last thing I want to happen to you guys. Now, if you guys have any questions or comments, definitely leave those down below, and don't forget to tag Monetary Makeup so I can easily find your comment. All right, on to the wear test and my final thoughts. Whew. It has been a day, you guys. It is snowing and hailing in Michigan. I am not ready for winter. I don't do well in the cold, but it's where I live, so what am I going to do? I guess I just have to get over it. Okay, so let me zoom you guys in so you can see what my makeup is looking like after 7 hours. Okay, you guys, so this is what my skin is looking like after about 7 hours. And I have a lot of thoughts about this Patrick Ta palette, but first, let me just give you a close-up. So again, we did the powder bronzer first all over, and then we went in with the cream over it. What do you guys think? So first, let's start with the packaging. I think the packaging is absolutely beautiful. It does have some weight to it, and it does feel luxurious. Of course, you get fingerprints all over it, but that's just kind of how this packaging works out. But overall, it does feel very high-end in my opinion. Okay, so my final thoughts are, when I first opened up this palette, I was thinking a couple different things. One, I was a little bit concerned how warm this shade in particular is. Now, the cream contour, it does look cool tone in comparison to the powder, but I'm going to swatch it actually next to my Fenty Amber and show you guys what I'm talking about in a second. But I was really worried that both of these shades were going to be just way too warm for my super pink cool undertone. But that was not the case. I am so shocked how much I love this palette. Now, the second thing I was worried about is I was worried that this bronzer shade was going to be too deep or too dark. Not the undertone, but the depth of the color. But again, I was pleasantly surprised. Now, next time I use this palette, and I am going to be using it until it runs out, but I will go in with the powder bronzer first and then the cream contour, because I used to do that where I would apply cream contour first and then go over it with bronzer, but especially on my cheekbones, I found it got very muddy because the bronzer would blend into the contour, whereas if I do the powder first and then just go in with a kind of light swipe, it really gives that chiseled effect. Now, the other thing is not only did the shades work out beautifully for me, but I really enjoyed the formula. This cream contour has a very light, balmy feel, and the powder formula definitely feels very silky. So let me show you guys what I was talking about with the undertones. So this is the Amber Cheeks Out in the shade Amber, and then this is the Patrick Ta Cream Bronzer. So as you can see, it's definitely more neutral, whereas the Fenty is a lot more cool, a little bit deeper, and a lot more gray than the Patrick Ta. But the thing is, you guys, even though I do think that this shade is a little bit too light, if you are fairer than me and you've been searching for a bronzer that is not orange and actually is not too deep, I would definitely go as She's Statuesque. I know how hard it can be as a fair person, but this shade was even a little bit too light for me, and I'm pretty fair to light, so I'm actually pretty excited that people who are a little bit more fair than me will get some great use out of this shade. And overall, I just want to say one last thing. Everything did last pretty well. I would say it faded a little bit, nothing super crazy, but I really love how natural these look together. As I mentioned, I had a couple reservations about the undertones in the shades, and I did have to build up the powder bronzer a little bit, especially on my huge forehead. But overall, just what a beautiful palette. I honestly cannot wait to use this more. I'm definitely going to be picking up another one if I do run out. But yeah, can you guys see what I was talking about? When I first saw that contour shade, I was thinking, oh my gosh, that's going to show up not necessarily orange, just not really resemble a shadow, but it did, it really did. So let me know, what do you guys think? Have you picked up any of the Patrick Ta contour bronzer duos? Definitely let me know. Did you like it? Did you not? I'd love to hear all your thoughts about this. All right, you guys, hopefully the quick topic of the day was helpful, as well as the swatches, the wear test, and the demo. If you guys have any questions, don't forget to tag Monetary Makeup down below and let me know all your thoughts. All right, you guys, thank you so much for watching. Love you guys, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.